everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, and sorry this is going up so late. There's a couple of reasons why I didn't put it up on time, but I'm going to explain them momentarily. So, this past weekend we had the Poisoned Nectar Monthly. As promised, I wanted to talk a little bit about the decks from that tournament that did particularly well. I'm going to be walking through the top 4 lists because they're all pretty interesting, and I think there's a lot of names that you are going to recognize. Now, I wanted to put this up last night, but the reason I didn't is because Dyer's lazy. That's the whole reason. Dyer's lazy. I'm just kidding. The reason is the people who won that tournament were really likely to do deep runs the next day on the subsequent webcam tournament by the official Elestrals server, and I didn't want to just leak their entire list 2 hours before they played it. So I was going to do it today when I got knocked out of the webcam tournament that Elestrals was hosting, but I ended up making it to semifinals. First, after Swiss, actually, the only person I lost to in Swiss was Jess, and then I lost in Top Cut to Jess as well. Those are my only losses all day, just Jess twice. What the hell's up with that? The deck that I played in that tournament is going to be up on the channel tomorrow for the 20 Spirit testing. It was brewed by Trish, and I could not be happier with how it performed. There are a couple of changes I would make moving forward, but nothing too major. So, back on track, let's talk about Poison Nectar Monthly. The Poison Nectar Monthly had 50 individuals in it. Thank you so much to everyone who showed up. I will say, we did learn a lot over the course of this event. Historically, when we hosted the Chalice Line Monthly, the big problem was TOs. Things would break, and someone had to be around to fix it, or importantly, to communicate to everybody that it was being fixed. But the actual game itself never really needed any sort of judges or assistance because it was all on an auto simulator. Inversely, these were webcam games, so we did need a judge. And while a couple people did what they could to sort of shore up judge calls when they did happen, it was not sufficient. We got through it okay, but certainly the priority in the future will be judge staff over event staff instead of the opposite. Outside of that, I feel pretty happy about how it ran. We didn't have any major delays. Nothing catastrophic happened. Thankfully, we didn't ever have to rely on challenge. The Elestrals reporting software made it really easy to run a tournament. If you're an LGS who wants to be able to run an event with like literally one person there, this is a perfect card game for you. And of course, a huge, unbelievable shout out to Comics to Astonish for partnering with us for this. If you're not familiar with Comics to Astonish, it's actually the local I go to every other Sunday. It's in Maryland, and I really would appreciate if you check it out. And if you check it out, you should also check out Chutney. It's an Indian restaurant 2 doors down from it in the same like plaza. It's some of the best Indian food I've ever had. Let's talk about the lists. So unsurprisingly, the most represented deck was this like Earth with a small splash of Thunder list that pretty much everybody was playing. You know the one: 3 Astrabbit, 3 Elechick, 3 Equilinx, 3 Viscerus, and then the rest, the like 2 or 3 Elestrals you get to pick out of the clear outliers in terms of power level. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the winning list by Bean Soldier TV. Let me give you just a quick once over. It's on 2 Demeter, 3 Equilinx and Earthquake, 2 Moss Station, 3 Viscerus, 3 Astrabbit, 3 Elechick, 2 Altar, 3 Ambrosia, 3 Gorgon's Gaze, 3 PTA, a Laurels, 3 Shield of Achilles, 2 Mudlet, 3 Eddy, and 3 Tsunami. In the side deck, it's got Spectaruses for like the errant foamies, Cryoblast for matches in which that's actually good. Josh was playing something that's really funny, which is Argo and Necklace of Harmonia with Scythe of Demeter, just to get people in games 2 and 3. If you get them in game 1, they start playing around it, and then those cards are useless. But if you just side it in games 2 and 3, they'll never expect it. And some Thunderstorms as well. It's about as cookie cutter as it gets, although, to be clear, this has only become the canonized best deck because of incredible repeat performances from Bean Soldier TV and the Elestronauts. And it's good because they're good, but because they're good, they built this good deck, if that makes sense. If you're a new player and you are looking for a deck to pick up that is pretty intuitive and also extremely strong, I really cannot recommend this list enough. It gets you a familiarity with all of the stuff in the format you really need to be concerned about, and it's super forgiving. Let's talk about the rest of this bullshit. Coming in second was Distant Coder, the one, the only Kevin. Okay, so the best deck is probably Earth Thunder, this nexus strategy that aims to go over the top in terms of advantage and selectively remove cards from your opponent's side of the field. So to take advantage of that, the second best deck is probably a bunch of bears that we put in the deck because we're Yu-Gi-Oh players. It's just a fucking archetype deck. Coder played bears to second. It was a 2-1. He was 1 game away from taking this whole thing with a deck that included 2 Abominursi. This deck is almost completely predicated around this card, Don't Poke the Bear, which is just phenomenal. It's like the only combat trick in Elestrals, and boy oh boy does it look good. He's got 2 Abominursi, 3 Ursier, 3 Ursicle, 3 Don't Poke the Bear, and then Ambrose, Astrabbit, Eddy, Gorgon's Gaze. Because they're in fire, he's able to natively play Lavalith, PTA resting on your laurels, Shield of Achilles, Smoltuga and Necruff, but also an Ash Rabbit for a little flexibility. 3 Tsunami and 2 Blizzard, I was shocked to see. It's kind of like Thunderstorm, with fundamental differences. In the side, he's got Galaxies. Boombat and Zaptor is pretty common to see in sides, and Pandora's Box is something you would expect in sides, even if it doesn't see a ton of play. Forge is to win these stadium wars that occasionally happen, Cryoblast where it's necessary. But I really want to talk about Galaxy because this card has become such an unbelievable house of late. The fact that it matches up really well against the removal options that aren't exactly Earthquake, now that that one specifically is limited, is fantastic. And importantly, it really confounds plays with like Eddie that so many people are relying on in these recent formats. It helps that Coder has a little bit of synergy with the Smoltuga as well, turning it into a 5 attacker and potentially getting aggressive in a world where you don't have to fear Gorgon. Unsurprising to see someone this good do well, but it is surprising that it was done with a deck this ass tier. Speaking of a really good person who did insane with an ass tier deck, let's talk about Dymax. Dymax, I believe, went undefeated in Swiss with Barog? Okay, so to get out ahead of the comments, this is playing a lot of the same really good cards from Earth Nexus. The Demeters, the Earthquake, the Equilinx, the Mostation, the Viscerus, the Eddie. It's also playing a bunch of cards that deck isn't playing. Not only is it playing its title critter in Barabog, but it's also playing Foamies, Galaxies as well. Now, Galaxy isn't super common in Earth, but it's theoretically playable. Foamy is a card that was kind of forecasted to never be playable again as Specteris became very popular. You could see, for instance, that Bean Soldier is playing it to bring in against decks that are playing cards like Foamy. That said, boy oh boy, is it good if your opponent isn't expecting it. If you don't have to fear Specteris, you only have to fear like the one of Earthquake or the one of Laurels, and outside of that, there's not a lot that really deals with it efficiently. The end goal of this deck is to make Barabog, which is, of course, insane. It says when an opponent casts an Elestral or Rune without water or earth, they must expend a spirit. So you can just sit on this guy in late game scenarios to prevent your opponent from ever really doing anything, because spending 2 to go 1 for 1 is just unbelievable late in the game when you'd be landing this guy anyway. The one problem with this guy is that he's got 3 attack, and so like an Eddie or a Mudlet can either crash with it or eat it, which is not ideal. But Dymax was specific and said like, listen, I made Barabog all the time. So I would say Barabog sweep, Barabog stocks on the rise, etc. And then would you believe that that wasn't the stupidest deck in top 4? Brewlock made top 4 with Cryo Scorch, exactly what it says on the tin, a deck aimed at making Cryo Scorch early and often. It's playing like the combo cards, Drops of Leaf, which is sort of Magical Mallet, Chains of Prometheus to reduce the game down to just the one guy on field when your opponent might have something like a shield set. 3 Cryoling, 2 Cryovern, and a Cryo Scorch, alongside cards like Comagma to filter, Narpoon to find them, Necruff and Smoltuga to maybe mount an offense, to simplify the game state to a point where you can resolve a Cryoling into a Cryovern into, God willing, a Cryo Scorch. This is incredible. I mean, it's missing a lot of cards that you would expect to be played in quote-unquote good decks. No Rabbit, no nothing. But at the end of the day, the results speak for themselves. I really like the plan out of the board into a more focused Fire Nexus deck, similar to the one that Trish played at Kokomo. It's got Kindleos, Rummacoles, Volcanic Forge, and those, of course, enable not only winning Stadium Wars, but also getting into positions where you can play a more control-style game against an opponent who has boarded a bunch of shitty cards to deal with Cryo Scorch. Love this for Brewlock. Super happy he was able to do what he was able to do, and so amazed that we had 4 different decks in the top 4. I mean, how does that happen? Look at this weekend's results from the actual tournament. There were 2 different decks in the top 16. So, you know, fun stuff happening at the Poison Nectar Monthly. So that's that with respect to the event. In the future, one thing that I really want to do that we didn't do for this one because it's kind of in its infancy is I do want to stream some of the top matches using the YouTube live function. I'm talking probably top 4 finals or maybe just finals. We'll see what kind of time I have available during those weekends. But if that's something you'd like to see, if you'd like other improvements to the PNM, let me know in the comments, unless the comment is you should let more people in. 64 was a lot. And I apologize if you didn't make it in, but again, if you want to be a part of them, it will be announced on the YouTube community page, 5 p.m. Wednesday, the week of the event. I will see you next time. Peace.